All right, let's go ahead and get started here. We'll start introducing Nebula. So those of you not familiar with it, we launched Nebula all the way back in 2016. So we've been doing this for what's that, about 6 years now? And this was the first, what we call a full stack cloud networking solution. Full stack meaning it was designed to manage access points, switches, and gateways, basically the key networking components of any computer network. At the time, most cloud-based solutions were really aimed at the enterprise space. Probably the name you're most familiar with is Meraki, which was bought by Cisco. And then you did see various cloud offerings that were usually focused on wireless and often didn't include any sort of switches or gateway products. So Nebula is made up of a couple different things. So we've got our security gateways, our access points, and our UTM firewall products. So those are our hardware options. We have a Nebula mobile app that you can use. And then the core of Nebula is what we call Nebula Control Center. So Nebula Control Center is where you go to do everything in Nebula. You access it just by going to nebula.zyxel.com. You log in, and that is where you will find everything you need. Nebula itself is hosted in Amazon Web Services Cloud, or AWS. So there's nothing that you need to install or run on your end of things. And the main idea behind Nebula is to take all of this stuff that you do when you're setting up a new network for a customer and try to either remove some of the things that you may need to purchase or buy separately, and to try to streamline things so it takes you less time. So the key takeaway is that it ends up saving you both time and money. So some of the things here, installation's much quicker. There is no need to configure any of the devices locally. Everything is done through the cloud, with some minor exceptions. No need to set up monitoring equipment, no need to set up remote access, so you don't have to set up VPNs or port forwards. Everything is automatically done and accessed through the cloud. Logs are stored in the cloud, etc. So we'll start talking about some of the features here of Nebula. So one of the key things here is the ability to get you up and running in just a few minutes. You simply need to log in, create an account at nebula.zyxel.com. Add your hardware that you want to manage to the Nebula cloud, and you can do this by using the mobile app to scan the QR codes that can be found either on the device itself or on the box that the device came in. And then you're pretty much done. Nebula has got some of the key features that you would need, some default features or configurations set up and ready to go to get devices onto the internet. And from that point, you can start configuring things. You don't need to wait for the hardware to actually even be physically installed before you can start installing stuff, which leads us to, set up without needing to unbox. So even before you finalize the hardware you need for your customer's install, you can at any point set up what we call an organization for your customer and start setting up sites for your customer and starting to make configurations of some of the key features. A lot of the settings can be set up before you even bother install or assigning hardware to the device or to your customer or to your site. And then again, all you need to do is scan the QR code on the outside of the box, assign it to your customer, and then ship the hardware off to your customer's location. Once it's been plugged in, it will reach out to the internet, it'll download the latest firmware, and it'll download whatever configuration files it needs based on the site that it has been assigned to. So the Nebula agent is built directly into our hardware. So if you buy Nebula compatible hardware, it has the capability to reach out and talk to the cloud itself. So there's no need for cloud keys. There's no need for local wireless LAN controllers, CNA devices, no need to install software on a virtual machine, whether it's at your customer location or back at your data center. None of that. Again, the Nebula Control Center is hosted on AWS by us, and then the hardware itself has everything it needs to reach out to the internet to talk to our cloud. So anywhere you've got internet access, you have access to your customers and their networks. Nebula has been designed to work in a web browser, and it'll work just great on a web browser, whether you're talking about a PC, a Macintosh, or even a tablet. We've spent a lot of time optimizing the web interface for tablet devices. And then if you don't have either of those, you're using a mobile phone, you can use our mobile app to access not all of the features, but a lot of the key features, and certainly you can use the mobile app to keep an eye on what's going on your customers' networks and let you know if there's something that maybe needs a little bit more attention. Guest networking is built directly into Nebula, so the ability to set up captive portals for guests to be able to get access to the internet is something that's built in on both our our access points and on our gateways. So if you only need to provide captive portal to wireless users, there's no need to configure it on a gateway or buy a separate gateway device. The access points have the ability to do captive portal themselves. The access points also have the ability to do their own NATing. So you can put the guest network on a separate subnet from your corporate network, as well as other things like layer 2 isolation, VLAN separation, things like that. So the captive portal is really flexible. The landing page is hosted by us. We have a basic editor that's built into the Nebula interface, so you can change things around, add your customers' logos, things like that. But if you're looking for even more customization from that, we allow you to download the HTML files and the CSS files, edit them, and then re-upload them to Nebula for us to host those pages. And if you need even more custom functionality, you can always point the captive portal at a web page that you host on your own servers. And then for getting guests on the network, we've got a lot of options for you. We have a terms of service page, so you can allow people on once they agree to a terms of service. You can use usernames and passwords to control who gets on the network. Give me just a second here. Okay. Sorry about that interruption. We've got the ability to have guests log in and register using and create their own usernames and passwords. We have the ability to have users log in using Facebook. So there's a lot of options there that are built into Nebula. And then on the wireless side of things, we've got a lot of the features that you would expect us to have. We offer smart mesh functionality. So not all of your APs need to be hardwired. Those that do not have a hardwired connection, or those that for some reason have that hardwired connection severed, can automatically be set to connect to a mesh. As many hops as needed to get back to a dedicated wireless connection. We support WPA2 and WPA3 enterprise security, as well as pre-shared keys. And we support all the industry standards as far as quick roaming goes, so 802.11r, KV, etc. On the switch side of things, most of our switches offer what we call intelligent power over Ethernet. So instead of using the industry standard way of reserving power based on classes, some of which are quite large, we can intelligently monitor the power draw of connected devices and only allocate the power that's required, freeing up additional budget for more devices. We've got a number of things in there, ACL rules, VLAN configuration, 802.1x authentication, loop guard, DHCP server guard, IGMP snooping are all available on our switches. And the switches virtually stack, allowing you to configure ports across multiple switches at the same time. So firmware updates and configuration changes are all done over the air. You simply log into the Nebula interface to push those out or to configure the timing on those. Firmware updates can be scheduled, so you can choose a date and time when you want to push out those updates, so it'll have minimal impact on your customers' networks. All configuration changes, you simply make them in the Nebula interface, and within a few minutes they will be pushed out to that customer's site, and the devices will update based on that. On the security side of things, we make VPNs fairly easy. If you're doing site-to-site VPNs and all the sites are managed by Nebula, you simply go into the VPN interface, choose the sites you want to connect together, choose the topology you want to use, and the Nebula interface will take care of everything else on the back end. We also make it really easy for you to have mobile users connect back to the Nebula or to your gateway through Nebula. So we can use L2TP over IPsec to work with most mobile devices, and we have the ability to email out a script that'll automatically do the configuration. So they don't have to bring the device into IT to set up. You don't have to walk them through it on the phone. So that automated script works for Windows, Macintosh, and iOS devices. Nebula was designed from the ground up with the idea to have all of your customers in one place and make it really easy for you to quickly jump between customers or between sites at a customer. So when you're doing configuration changes, you don't have to remember different credentials for different sites, different VPN settings. It's all done through the Nebula interface. So here's an example here. When you choose one of your customers, this is the view you will be presented with. As you can see here, we have Google Maps integration, so you can have visual representation of where your customer sites are on a map. And then you see here, assuming they have multiple sites, you can get a quick snapshot view of what's going on in each of those sites, any devices that are offline, etc. And then drilling down to the individual site takes you to this landing page here. So these widgets across the top, these are things that you can configure. So you can choose to have which widgets you care about showing what's going on. So that can show you things like how many users are currently on the wireless network, what your PoE utilization is versus your available PoE budget, things like that. If you're using a Nebula Gateway with UTM services here, you've got the ability to get visual representation of a lot of what's going on in the network, which individual applications are using bandwidth, which users are using bandwidth, what sort of security threats have been blocked, etc. And then up here at the top, we've got drop-down menus. One of them shows you all of your customers, and then once you choose a customer, one of them shows you all the sites for that customer. So you just use those drop-downs to quickly jump between different customers or different sites. And then all of the devices and things you'd want to configure are over here on the left-hand side of the page. So here's one of our wireless views for you. So this is showing the client view. So you see we've got a chart over time showing network utilization of that wireless network. And then down here, we've got a thing showing you all of the clients that have been or are currently connected to the network. And again, the fields that you see here are completely customizable. So you can choose which information you want to see or don't want to see. But you can see things on there such as the last time they connected, what brand of NIC card they're using, which AP they're connected to, which SSID they're connected to, the signal strength, etc. Then we've got a similar view over here for our switches. So as you can see down here at the bottom, again, we've got the ability to see over time what network utilization has been. Up here at the top, we've got a visual of the switches that may be on the network, and then color-coded ports here, so you can see which ports have something connected, which ports are gigabit versus fast Ethernet connections, which ports are providing PoE power currently. And then when you want to configure your ports, you simply select the ports you want to configure, hit the configure button, and then all of the key settings are right there in one place. So you can, change VLAN settings, things like that, simultaneously across multiple ports on multiple switches. So everything I've talked about up to this point is free with Nebula. So I think Nebula is the last cloud solution out there, or at least full stack cloud solution out there that is free. We do not put a limit on the number of customers you can manage with the free version of Nebula. We do not put a limitation on the number of devices you can manage with Nebula. So you can have all of your customers, all of your devices managed in Nebula at no extra fee. Now, we do offer optional licenses that unlock additional features. So I will talk about that here in the coming slides. So to begin with, when you look at our product offerings, you will see products labeled as Nebula Flex or Nebula Flex Pro. When we first started doing Nebula Cloud, we followed a model similar to Meraki and Cisco, whereas if you wanted cloud networking, you bought the Nebula hardware. If you didn't want cloud networking or cloud management, you bought a different line of hardware, just like Cisco does with their Meraki. Over time, we have gotten away from that, and at this point, just about every device we have at this point is going to be what we call Nebula Flex. So Nebula Flex is basically we've taken our Nebula agent, we've added some extra memory into our products, and we've added the Nebula agent to all of our products. So You can standardize on one set of models of hardware, and you can use them for all of your customers, whether you plan to manage them with Nebula or plan to manage them the more traditional way by logging into the GUI, using command lines, using SNMP. So everything you see labeled as Nebula Flex can be used as either a cloud-managed device or a standalone device. Products labeled as Nebula Flex Pro include 1 year of our optional Pro Pack license, which we'll talk about here in a couple slides. So that comes bundled with the device. And in the case of our access points, it also unlocks local controller management. So if you buy a Nebula Flex Pro AP, you can choose to manage it with the cloud, manage it directly, or manage it with a local area hardware controller. So again, the idea behind having this is giving you flexibility, because you may have some customers that don't trust the cloud, that don't want the cloud, and there are still situations where the feature set that's available in Nebula may be slightly different than the feature set that's available in standalone. This is particularly true on our security gateways. So just a quick breakdown here of the products. Nebula Flex products are going to be our access points that are 3 or 4 digits and start with the numbers 1 and 2, or those APs which are just 2 digits. So that would be the NWA 50AX, NWA 110AX, NWA 210AX, etc. On the switch side of things, this is our GS1920 V2 series, our XS1930 and XGS1930 series. And then on the security side of things, it is our USG Flex models here. Nebula Flex Pro would be all of our 3 or 4 digit APs that start with 5 or 6. So that would be like a WAC 510D, WAC 6303D-S, etc. On the switch side of things, it is our GS1350 series, our GS2220 series, and our XS3800 series. And then on the security gateways, it is going to be our USG Flex series products, which come bundled with our UTM services. So if you're buying a USG Flex, that we sell them in 2 versions, one with UTM licenses bundled, one without. So the version without licenses bundled is USG Flex. Those that come with UTM bundled are Nebula Flex Pro. And then our ATP series, which is only sold with the UTM licenses, those come with 1 year of the Nebula Flex Pro bundle. So now we'll start talking about licensing. In the early days, it was simple. We had the free version of Nebula, which we call the base pack, and we had the pro version of Nebula, which unlocks some additional features. We got a lot of feedback from people saying, the free version, is missing a few features I need, but, the pro pack's giving a lot more than what I want. So we did roll out a year ago the Plus pack. And we'll go through what the differences are between each of these different licensing packs. And again, it's optional. These licenses are usually bought as an annual license, and if those licenses expire, it simply drops back to the free version. At no point do you get locked out of your hardware. So the important thing here when we're talking about Nebula Plus and Nebula Pro is that they require a license for each device. And you cannot mix and match licensed and unlicensed or different classes of license for the same organization in the Nebula interface. So usually your customer will be an org, and then that customer will have sites underneath it. If for some reason you have one customer and some of their sites need to be Pro Pack, some of their sites need to remain Plus Pack, you would split them into 2 different organizations. So again, licensing is per device. So to use Plus or Pro Pack, every device in the organization needs to have a valid Plus or Pro Pack license. Now, if you add a device to Nebula that doesn't come with its own license, you are given a 15-day window to add the license. Same thing goes if some of your devices are expiring before others, you will be given a 15-day grace window to fix those. If you do not, and you end up in a situation where one or more devices do not have a license, after that 15-day grace period, the entire organization drops back to the free version of Nebula. So now we'll talk about what's available in the different models here. So again, Free version of Nebula, unlimited number of devices, unlimited number of customers that you can manage, and all of the key core features of the products are manageable in Nebula. So that's the same for all three versions of the licenses here. All of them have our zero-touch auto deployment, where the device automatically reaches out to the cloud, updates its firmware, and downloads its configuration. So there's no differences there. All of them offer the ability to update firmware from the cloud. All of them offer the ability to do basic scheduling of firmware updates and when those updates take place. All versions of Nebula give you access to our mobile apps for deployment, management, push notifications. So the first area here where we're going to run into some differences has to do with log information. The free version of Nebula keeps 24 hours worth of logs in the cloud. Now, we do offer the ability to export logs into syslog, but if you're not using syslog, the cloud itself is only going to store 24 hours worth of logs. The Plus Pack will store a week's worth of information of logs, and the Pro Pack stores a year's worth of information of logs. When it comes to admin accounts, and this is done on a per customer basis. So an organization being managed by the free version of Nebula, you can have 5 different admin accounts assigned to that customer. Plus Pack increases it to 8. Pro Pack gives you no limit. And the idea behind this is, if you have admins managing the site, you shouldn't be using one admin account for everybody. You should be using different admin accounts to control access. With Pro Pack, it's nice because we have an auditing that we'll talk about a little bit, which stores configuration changes based on who made them, so it helps you with troubleshooting down the road, but also just for security reasons. If you have to let somebody go, you don't want to have to change everybody's password to get in. So you can have more than 5 admin accounts. It's just only 5 can be assigned per customer in the free version of Nebula. We have a cloud authentication database. This is a cloud database that can be used to store usernames and passwords for captive portal logins, for 802.1x authentication, or doing MAC filtering. So if you're using the Nebula Cloud to do that, you've got 50 entries in the free version of Nebula. Plus Pack doubles that to 100, and then with Pro Pack, you have an unlimited number of entries into that database. Now, if you are doing 802.1x or something like that, you do not need to use the built-in Nebula database. You can always use Radius servers. But if you are using our cloud database, these are the limitations that you have. Again, all of them have the same basic features as far as the core networking settings, SSID settings, VLAN, PoE, firewall rules, etc. All of them do MAC-based and 802.1x authentication. All of them do captive portal. And now some of the differences here, advanced firmware scheduling. So all versions can schedule firmware. With the Plus and Pro Pack, you get advanced firmware scheduling. It lets you set schedules based on the type of device. So you can schedule your access points to update at a different time from your switches, for instance. It also allows you to set schedules for individual devices. Plus and Pro Pack give you advanced reporting features. So you can go in and set up reports to be generated weekly or monthly that then get emailed to you or your customer. And these reports also can be branded with your logo. So, for instance, you can send reports to your customer showing them what the UTM services have been doing to protect their network. So those are require a Plus or Pro Pack to do. We have an automatic network topology view. Basically, we'll take everything on your network and we'll diagram what is connected to what. So it's a great tool for troubleshooting things if you start running into network issues. So that's something that requires Plus or Pro Pack. You can set up email alerts with Plus and Pro Pack. So that'll let you know, for instance, if a device goes offline for a certain period of time, you can have it email you to notify you what's going on. And then also on the captive portal side of things, Plus and Pro Pack unlock what are called Wi-Fi vouchers. So basically the ability to generate a unique key that you give to your customers that's valid for a certain period of time, similar to your traditional, commercial hotspot access. And then now everything I talk about from this point on will be exclusive to the Pro Pack. So it includes what I was talking about before, the fact that we keep audit logs. So we'll monitor every configuration change and who made that change and store those in your logs to help you with troubleshooting. ProPack unlocks the ability to clone existing customers, the ability to use templates to make changes across multiple customers at the same time, the ability to back up and restore switch configurations, the ability to open a ticket directly in the Nebula interface for support issues, advanced Radius AAA authentication features, ProPack exclusive, advanced Wi-Fi control, including our intelligent AI, where we can automatically make changes to your Wi-Fi network based on what we're seeing as far as user behavior goes, advanced switch controls, so this is port-based bandwidth control, the ability to automatically assign VLANs based on the MAC address of the devices, and some advanced IGMP snooping settings, some dedicated IPTV feature sets. With our 1350 series, the ability to have our GS1350 switches automatically power cycle non-responsive devices, and enable extended range where you can provide PoE and data for up to 300 meters instead of the standard 100. Advanced VPN settings here, etc. So those are the differences between Base, Plus, and Pro. So again, these are, you need to have a license for each device in the organization in order to be able to enable these features. So here's that automatic topology view I was talking about. You can see here it draws out and shows you which devices are connected to which other devices. Now we have a different type of license called the MSP Pack, and as the name implies, it's features that would be probably beneficial for our managed service provider. So while Plus and ProPack are device-based licenses, the MSP license is a user-based license. So you buy this license for a specific admin account, and then it unlocks features for every organization that that admin is managing. So usually, even if you have multiple admins, most of our partners will buy one copy of this license and give it to their primary admin account to unlock these features for it. So what it unlocks here for you is what we call the MSP view. Very similar to the org view we saw earlier, where you remember that shows you that you choose a customer, it shows you all their sites. This is similar, but it's showing you all of your customers here. So all of the organizations they have, whether or not they are using the free version or paid version of Nebula, whether those licenses have expired recently, how many sites are currently configured, how many devices are currently online versus offline. So it's a good view to give you an idea of what's going on all of your different customers and just make it that much quicker to jump to a customer that may be having some sort of issues. It also unlocks some additional features for you. One of them is MSP branding. You can rebrand the Nebula interface with your company's logos and remove the Zyxel support contact information and replace it with your own contact information. So if you're giving your customers view-only access to, say, their organizations so they can see what's going on, might be a nice tool for you there. It adds the ability to group admin accounts into teams. So if instead of having to, if one of your users leaves one of your admins leaves the company, instead of having to go to each organization to remove their access to it, you can simply set up a team, assign teams to your customers, and then at any point you can just edit the team, remove that user, and now they're gone from all of those orgs, or ultimately you hire somebody new, you just add them to the specific teams, and then they'll automatically add it to all of those orgs. We have the ability to do cross-org synchronization, where you can synchronize certain settings between multiple customers simultaneously. And then another feature it unlocks, it's not on the slide, is it gives you email notifications across all of your organizations, even the free ones. So if the only paid feature that you're really interested in is those email notifications when devices go offline, rather than having to upgrade all of your customers to Plus Pack or Pro Pack, you can simply buy the MSP license, and now you have that feature for all of your sites. We just got a question here from Phil. Let me read it here. So it says, it seems our devices, when we add a switch to a client that already has a license, it reduces the amount of time for that license. No. So every device needs to have a license. I didn't answer this here. But those licenses are individual to the individual device. So if the license is, you buy a 12-month license and assign it to a device, that license is for 12 months. Now, in the old days, we used to use pooling, where we would convert the licenses into points, assign the points to the organization, and then divide it up. Basically distribute those points across all of the devices. So if you bought a device that didn't have a license, you added it into your organization, you would see everything drop back. So starting last year, when we switched over to license 2.0, each license is, timeline is assigned to a single individual device. So if you assign a 1-year license to a device, it's a 1-year license. That time never changes. So you may be confusing it with the old licensing, not the current licensing. And you can go into organization and licensing, and you can see every one of your devices and which licenses are currently assigned to them, and when each of those licenses is going to expire. The other area where maybe it's causing some confusion here is if you buy, let's say today you install a bunch of products, they all have a 1-year license, so they're all going to expire March 2023. And then in June, you add some more devices, which also have 1-year licenses. You'll end up in the situation where some of your devices are going to expire in March. Those original devices are still expiring in March. The new devices are going to expire in June, right, a year after you've added them. But when you look at the licensing, right, it's going to tell you, hey, this organization is going to lose ProPack licensing in March, because that's when those licenses are the soonest those devices are going to expire. So you aren't losing the license for those June ones. It's still a 1-year license from that June date. But you do need to renew those licenses in March for those devices that are expiring in March. I probably did a horrible job explaining that, but I hope that makes sense. We do sell monthly licenses. So you can always add some monthly licenses, devices that are expiring earlier than others, so everything expires in the same month. And we make it really easy to do that in the Nebula interface. If you go into licensing, you can simply go in there, choose the date, the month that you want everything to expire, and it'll tell you exactly how many monthly licenses need to be purchased. And if you want to, you can purchase them from the Nebula interface, or of course you can always reach out to your distributor or Zyxel salesperson and buy the cards individually. But at this point, you can simply go into Nebula, tell it when you want everything to expire. It'll tell you what licenses you need. You can choose to buy those licenses, and it'll automatically apply them and activate them for you, so everything's expiring at the same time. Anyway, so back to licenses here. We finished talking about the MSP license. Now, there are some other licenses that are available that are part of Nebula. So the main ones here are going to be our security licenses. So if you're using a Zyxel gateway and you want to enable UTM type services, we do have different licenses available. The old NSGs, you buy the NSS security pack for. If you're using the USG Flex products, we have the UTM security pack. If you are using the ATP products, you would buy a ATP Gold license. So in the case of the USG Flex and the ATP, this is the same UTM licenses that you would normally buy for the standalone version if you want to enable these features. These UTM service licenses are completely independent of whether you're using Nebula free version, Plus Pack, Pro Pack, or again, if you're not even using Nebula, if you're using them standalone. So these are just the licenses that unlock these additional UTM features. So that's, gateway-based, antivirus, anti-spam, content filtering, things like that. And that is something I do want to highlight here. With Nebula, the whole network does not need to be Nebula. It's very common out there for people to only use Nebula for the access points, or their customer has a router that was provided by their ISP. They don't want to remove it or replace it. So you're not managing that gateway. You're still using Nebula though, maybe for the switches and the access points. So Nebula allows you to manage Nebula devices, but Nebula, the whole network doesn't need to be Nebula. It's just anything that's on the network that's not a Nebula device. You would manage the traditional way you would manage any device before Nebula. We also have a license here called Secure Wi-Fi. And again, this is a license that's available both for Nebula or for standalone security devices. Even though it's called Secure Wi-Fi and enables features on the AP, it's actually a license for your security gateway product. And basically, it allows you to turn a Nebula managed or a controller managed access point into a remote VPN gateway. So the idea behind this is, we're seeing lots, thanks to the pandemic, lots of businesses have moved to remote work or moved to hybrid work. And the challenges you get is how do you securely allow your remote users into your corporate network? And you run into a couple of different ways. One is you provide them a VPN gateway appliance to install in their home. The challenge you run into with that is oftentimes they've got a router that's already provided by AT&T or Comcast or Spectrum, and they don't know how to put it into bridge mode, or bridge mode may not even be an option. So you end up in a situation where this VPN gateway is double natted behind the ISP's router, and maybe you have issues due to that double NAT scenario. The other way of doing it is you install or configure the VPN on the individual laptop or on their mobile devices, where the challenge is just, those devices have to be brought into the office for IT to configure, or you have to walk them through the remote configuration process. So the solution to both of those is this feature here, the secure Wi-Fi functionality. So you give the user a Nebula managed access point, they plug it into their router, and it has an SSID on this access point that is essentially anything that connects to that SSID automatically gets VPN'd back to the corporate network. So for security reasons, in order to use this SSID, you do have to enable 802.1x, so the user has to authenticate with a username and password, and you also have to use two-factor authentication. So that way, you've got an AP, you just give the AP to the user, no configuration required other than in the cloud. They'll plug it into their existing router, it'll power up, it'll connect to the internet, it'll connect to the Nebula cloud, and then it'll automatically download its configuration and set up this secure Wi-Fi scenario for VPN access back to the office. And now we've recently offered a new UTM licensed, or UTM-like license that's just for the access points. So again, this is very common. We run into a lot of customers where they're only using Nebula to manage their access points, right? There's one gateway, there's one switch, no big deal, but there may be 15 or 20 access points. So Nebula makes it really easy to configure those access points. So this allows you to deploy UTM-like services to Wi-Fi users that are using these access points. So connect and protect is what we call it. It's based on using an IP reputation filter. So it's not doing deep packet inspection or things like that. It's looking at the websites or the IP addresses that wireless users are trying to connect to and rating them based on whether or not they're sources of spam, whether they're known for botnets, whether they're known for phishing, et cetera, and then blocking those connections to those sites. So there's two versions of the license based on which hardware you are using. The basic Connect and Protect license is available on our NWA 1123 ACV3, our WAC 500, and our WAC 500H. Then we also offer a Connect and Protect Plus license, which works on basically all of our Wi-Fi 6 access points. So it gives you the same thing, that same level of UTM-like security for your users, but it also gives you the ability to do application-based bandwidth throttling. So you can highlight certain applications and set bandwidth rules for those specific applications. So a little extra feature there. And the interesting thing with this is this license is a per device license, but not all of your APs need to have it. So for instance, if you have a retail storefront where you've got a couple of APs in the public area and then you've got a bunch of APs in the warehouse, and you're looking just to provide this sort of extra security for those guest users, because who knows what they're going to do, you can just buy it just for those APs, assign it to those APs, and then only those devices will have these UTM security services, where all of your employee license or employee access points only don't offer them necessarily. So that today concludes everything I was planning to talk about with Nebula. If you want to play with it and you haven't already, you can at any point go to nebula.zyxel.com and you can log into a demo site that we have there. It's a true live site. It's a couple different APs and some different hotels. You can log in and play around with the interface. If you are one of our reseller partners and part of our reseller program, you can reach out to your salesperson to get a 60-day demo of some Nebula equipment to play around with in your lab. And then just, this webinar was recorded. Most of our webinars are recorded, and then they'll get posted to our YouTube page, which is Zyxel America channel. So if you come in late to today's presentation, if there's a different presentation on a different day, you end up missing it you wanted to see, it will usually get posted within 24 to 48 hours to our YouTube page. And you can always go back and watch stuff from months ago. So it's a nice little tool there for you. And then we're also on LinkedIn as Zyxel US channel. And with that, any questions you have, send them in with the question and answer interface here. So Phil's asking here if we have a site that is using Plus or Pro Pack, so a paid site, and the new device does not have a license, basically what happens after 15 days. So after 15 days, that organization will fall back to the free version. So you will function as a free version of the site until such point that you add a license to that device. And then once you add a license to that device, everything will switch back over to the paid version of Nebula with the licenses. So you're not necessarily losing anything, but the countdown on those licenses start the day you activate them. It doesn't get paused if for some reason you choose not to put licenses on all your devices. So at that point, it'll drop back to free. Now, having said that, devices and licenses can be transferred between customers. So maybe your customer decides that they don't want to do, they don't need the paid version of Nebula anymore. You can always take non-bundled licenses and transfer them to a different device on a different work. Licenses which are bundled with a device are stuck with that device they were bundled with, but licenses you purchase independently, those can always be transferred to another organization or to another device. Okay, I'll stick around. That was the only question I've got. Maybe Phil's got a follow-up, or maybe one of you has another question. Again, feel free to send them in using the question and answer interface here in Zoom. While we wait to see if anyone else has any more questions, my email is up there on the screen. It is seanr@zyxel.com, SHAWNR. Feel free to send me feedback on today's presentation. Feel free to ask me questions offline. And we're always desperate for new topics that you guys would like to see turned into a webinar. So if there's something that you've got ideas on, feel free to send them to me. I handle Nebula, I handle access points, and I handle consumer equipment and some of our CPE type service provider products. So if you've got ideas on topics you think both you or other people would be interested in being turned into a webinar, feel free to email those suggestions to me. I'm not seeing any more questions coming in, so I'm going to go ahead and end today's webinar. A question right here at the end. This is coming from Garnick. Does the Nebula have Wi-Fi heat map opportunity? No. Nebula doesn't have a heat map functionality, and really proper heat maps really need to be done on the client side. So you need some sort of mobile device or laptop or phone with the heat mapping software, and then wander around to get a real idea of where the coverage is and where the coverage isn't. I know there are some solutions out there, and we actually, I think, currently offer one if you're not using Nebula for called ZWO, where you can import in, a floor plan and drop in APs, and it'll try to generate a heat map for you. My experience is that even the best ones, the expensive ones, aren't particularly good, just because the environment itself has such a huge effect on what's going on, and you don't always know, what's behind that drywall. Is there a bunch of pipes and conduit back there? Is there concrete? Is it wood studs? Is it metal studs? So when you're trying to do heat maps, it's really best practices to do it on site using a mobile device where you walk around and it measures the signal and then plots those to something. So you're actually seeing the real coverage out there rather than, software trying to make a best guess. Phil is asking about the cost of each license. To find out your exact cost, you would reach out to whoever you buy your licenses from. So if you're buying from distribution, that would be Cynix, Ingram Micro, D&H, Wave, Pace. They'll tell you what your individual pricing is. I think just roughly for a Nebula license, it's somewhere in the ballpark of around $35 to $40 per device per year. We do sell monthly licenses. We do sell multi-year licenses. You can also buy it through the Nebula interface. Again, you can go into Nebula. You can go in there, and it'll tell you what licenses you need, and it'll give you the opportunity to buy the licenses online, either through Marketplace or Circle. So if you're an end user, you would buy them through Marketplace. If you are a reseller, you would buy them through Circle. And if you're a reseller and you aren't already part of Circle, sign up for it, because you do get your partner discounts when you buy through Circle as one of our partners. Otherwise, if you're buying as an end user, you're paying closer to MSRP, I think. So generally, it's cheaper as an end user. Generally, it's cheaper to buy through a reseller. As a reseller, generally, it's cheaper to buy through Circle or through distribution. But if you're looking to do it cheap and dirty, you can always buy it at full price through Marketplace, and that way the licenses are automatically applied for you. So that looks like that's it for for questions. Anything else though? Feel free to email me directly, seanr@zyxel.com, or reach out to your salesperson, Jacob, Andy, David, Troy, with anything you may need. Thanks, guys. Appreciate you turning out and sitting through this with me.